Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Jerome Craig, and today we're going to talk about how to achieve metabolic flexibility. We're specifically going to look at the benefits of nutritional ketosis and intermittent fasting. Now, why have I created this presentation? Well, there's a lot of confusion out there. Ketogenic diets and fasting techniques are very popular these days, and many people are approaching them with the wrong thing in mind. Not everyone is succeeding doing them, and there is so much misinformation out there. Just because someone did it one way and it worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So we're going to clear up some of the myths surrounding these approaches, and first I'll tell you a little bit about me and my approach. I'm a certified functional medicine practitioner, which means that I work very closely with my patients in looking at their nutritional, lifestyle, environmental factors and how they affect their health. I find myself as playing a role as primarily an educator. I like to educate my patients about the human body. I come from an education background, having taught anatomy and physiology, pathology, and also the bioscience of nutrition to those looking to become nationally certified nutritional practitioners. So I realize that people just don't know much about how their body works, what it's supposed to be doing. And food and when you eat plays an important role in your overall health. So I want to educate you here a little bit today. And I also want to let you know that I don't subscribe to any get healthy overnight schemes. There's no such thing. Your body took a while to get to where it is now, and it might take a while to heal. But let's talk about the approaches that you can make. All right? So this is a little different presentation. I'm not just here to tell you how awesome ketogenic diets are. It's not for everyone. Fasting needs to be done right, and it has to be done for you. But I do want to touch on this idea behind metabolic flexibility. Everyone can stand to be metabolically flexible. So whether or not you decide to follow up with a ketogenic diet, or whether you like to dip your toes into different fasting techniques, hopefully what you really want to achieve is metabolic flexibility. So what does that mean? Well, before we get into that, let me ask you why you're here. This is a very important question, because your why determines the how and the when. If you just want to play with this, your why is not very compelling to you. If you have a specific thing that you want to solve, then really connect with that why. Why do you want to solve that issue? Really let it resonate with you, and then the how and the when and the where become a little bit more apparent. Now, today's takeaways, I'm just going to say we do need to be flexible, right? And metabolic flexibility may be a new concept to you. I'll explain what it is and why it's important. We're going to look at nutritional ketosis, what it is and why it's so popular these days. And we'll look at intermittent fasting, same kind of idea. It's a very popular trend these days. Now, metabolic flexibility is the best kind of flexibility that you could achieve. This is a very ancestral kind of adaptation that we've developed over the millennia, and humans are not as flexible as we used to be. This can be seen with diabetes and insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. People are unable to access the fuel that they need at the time that they need it. So that's what flexibility is really about. Can I switch from being a sugar burner to a fat burner? Because when I have only been burning sugar my whole life, those metabolic processes, those pathways are very much upregulated, and your fat burning pathways may not be functioning very well at all. Okay, so this is an adaptive mechanism. You've heard of feast or famine. If we are always eating, we're just going to always expect food that way. If we are in times of fasting, we often feel kind of cranky and hungry and exhausted and fatigued. So we've got to look at a sensible approach to techniques to maintain or attain metabolic flexibility. So I just want to say metabolic flexibility is a scientific term. It was coined back in the 90s and has been examined in the scientific literature for a while. That's the point of the slide, just to show you. And just to reiterate, we want to burn fats when we're not exercising. Think of carbohydrates as an energy performance substrate. They can give you fuel pretty readily as long as your mechanisms are operating. Now, fat is going to sustain you for long periods of time, and when you're in a fasted state, hopefully you'll be able to access your fats and burn them for energy. All right, let's look at nutritional ketosis. Now here you see a standard keto food pyramid. You'll see that we're excluding all the starchy foods, the high carbohydrate foods, the refined sugars and such. And then you'll see that there's a large amount of meat at the base of this pyramid. Well, that may not work for everyone. Everyone has a different idea about what healthy eating is. So this food pyramid should be taken as a guideline and not necessarily have to be followed in a very, very strict manner. Now, why am I saying this? Well, there's no such thing as the ketogenic diet. There's many ways to approach it, and it all depends on your goal. Is your goal weight loss? Is your goal performance? Is it mental acuity? Is it some sort of disease that you're trying to reverse? All of these things matter. Before you even embark on a ketogenic diet, you've got to understand why you're doing it. So I want to talk about HFLC. This means high-fat, low-carbohydrate diets. They have been studied extensively in the medical literature, and there's a mix of results. Why is that? And is it a ketogenic diet? Not necessarily. High-fat, low-carb is being compared to the standard American diet, and even though high-fat, low-carb may mean something to you, it's not necessarily how those researchers conducted their studies. So don't get too caught up in high-fat, low-carb as being a ketogenic diet. You may have produced some ketones, but you never were ketogenically adapted just following a high-fat, low-carb diet. Now, high-fat ketogenic diet is what HFKD means, and this is when people are definitely reaping the benefits of producing ketones. Now, they may be producing ketones from the fats they are eating. This is not necessarily what you want if your goal is fat loss. You want to make ketones from the fat, the energy reserves that are on your body. And that's what KAD is. That is keto adaptation. So it's very, very different just eating fatty foods and producing ketones, and we'll talk about what ketones are. So before I get there, let's talk about SKD, CKD, TKD, HPKD. These are all different methods to approach a ketogenic diet. The standard ketogenic diet, the first one, is what most people think of, where they're eating 70 to 80% of their calories come from fats. They're eating very, very low carb and kind of moderately low protein. Now, cyclical ketogenic diets tend to cycle in and out of ketosis. These are very, very popular in the bodybuilding world or in the performance sports world. TKD is targeted ketogenic diets where you're actually targeting your carbohydrates for specific times to enhance your athletic performance. And then HPKD is also quite popular in the exercise realm, and that's where we're eating a high-protein ketogenic diet. Now, what are ketones? Ketones are produced by the liver when your body starts to oxidize fats. Now, if we are eating fatty foods, and certain kinds of fats are readily producing ketones, then we'll see an uptick in our ketones in our blood. And this we can measure. This is called beta-hydroxybutyrate, and we can measure it in the blood. Now, we also produce acetoacetate and acetone. These are also ketones, and they're byproducts. We can measure those in urine and breath, respectively. Why do we want to measure? Well, that's up to you. It depends on your goal. Just measuring ketones isn't why you're going to get into this ketogenic diet. You shouldn't be chasing your numbers on your ketones. There are many people who track numbers for very specific reasons, but we'll discuss that maybe a little later. So your body will make ketones in a fasted state if you are metabolically flexible. Most of us fast overnight. We go to bed, I should wake up and have detectable ketones in my blood in the morning. Now, not everyone's going to do that. Some people eat too late at night. They eat too much sugary foods. Their blood glucose is out of control, a little bit too high. That will suppress the production of ketones. Your body loves ketones. It's very good at fueling the brain. That's one reason why people go into ketogenic diets, is for cognitive enhancement. And there's other reasons, such as cardiovascular health. The heart loves to burn ketones that burn very cleanly. Your resting heart rate can go down on a ketogenic diet, and heart rate variability seems to improve as well. Before I move on, I just want to say, what's up with butter in the coffee, right? This is a very, very popular approach to get into a ketogenic state. People are doing these fat bombs. Now, that may help in the adaptation phase, and while I have used MCT oils and fat drinks in the morning to get people into a keto-adapted state, it's not necessarily what you want to rely on, and you shouldn't be doing them every day, especially if your goal is fat loss. All right. Let's talk about intermittent fasting. Before we get into the role of fasting in your health, I want to talk about what it is and what it isn't. Now, what it is, fasting means not eating. Not eating, we all do at some point. Some of us do it better than others. We fast overnight when we are sleeping, hopefully. Now, breakfast means breaking your fast. It has nothing to do with the time. But it's important to note that we will break our fast at some point, and that's where these different fasting techniques come in handy. What fasting isn't is kind of a haphazard approach to meal timing. Just skipping meals willy-nilly here and there, deciding to eat one day and not deciding to eat the other day, kind of creates metabolic mayhem. You have to be pretty metabolically flexible to handle that. Otherwise, you're going to screw up your hormonal control. We do know that there have been some studies that showing that this kind of approach tends to create problems for some individuals. Now, let's talk about the different ways to approach it. Probably one that people think about quite often is something known as time-restricted feeding. This is probably the most popular approach to intermittent fasting, where we just have a narrow feeding window. So the most popular approach is the 16-8, meaning that people fast for 16 hours and have an 8-hour eating window. It doesn't necessarily talk to how many meals that you have to eat during those 8 hours. It's just that you don't eat during that 16-hour window. This tends to work a little bit better for men. Some women can handle it. Some people say women should take a shorter fasting, maybe a 14-hour fast in a 10-hour eating window. It depends on the individual. Now, there's many different ways to schedule your feeding windows. Some people eat in a 4-hour window. Some people try 23-hour fasts and 1 hour of eating. Fasting mimicking diets are also quite popular. They've been studied quite a bit in the medical literature for the last 10 years. And what that looks like is typically there'll be a 3 to 5 day period once a month where people go really low calorie as they can handle. And that will tend to regenerate a lot of systems that we'll get to in a moment. Alternate day fasts are just like they sound. Every other day you're going to skip eating as much as you normally would. So you can go very, very low calorie, or you can fast as long as possible. And then the feeding days have no restrictions, and then you go back into a fasting or very, very low caloric intake day. This is a very popular diet in the UK. There are also other approaches here like the 5-2, which is eating 5 days of the week normally and 2 days a week where you restrict your caloric intake. This works great. This will enhance your metabolic flexibility. We'll talk about protein restrictions maybe some other time. Human growth hormone tends to be enhanced and rise during the fasted state. Where human growth hormone goes, so do many of the sex hormones. Autophagy is a term that is two parts. Autophagy, meaning eating self, and as part of the cellular mechanisms of cleanup. We can enhance autophagy in a fasted state. It doesn't really happen if you're in a constantly fed state. And autophagy is one of those things that is related to lifespan, increased detoxification, and restoration of the body. There's plenty of studies to show in animals that this works really, really well. Some maybe inconclusive studies in humans, but they are promising. Immune function tends to be enhanced in the fasted state, especially the longer fasts and looking at that kind of fasting mimicking diets. Insulin sensitivity tends to improve with all of these kinds of approaches. It all depends on the individual though. And of course, if we are more insulin sensitive, we typically have better controls over blood sugar, therefore appetite and cravings as well. So it all depends on how you approach fasting as to what kind of effect you're going to get from doing it. Now, there are many factors that will affect your ability to become metabolically flexible. One of the things that we cannot ignore is your hormonal health. There are many people who are a little bit too hormonally wrecked, whether it is adrenal health, thyroid health, sex hormones, what have you, to really just be able to dive into these approaches. They may need some repair before they go too far down this road. That said, I've used these clinically and in group settings using fasting and ketogenic diets to enhance hormone receptivity. We get insulin down, and then all sorts of hormones work very, very well. Sleep is another important factor. We sleep for about a third of our lives for a very, very good reason. And if we are not sleeping well, we know that we have poor blood sugar control, we have poor impulse control, we tend to have a whole lot of other health issues that the propensity tends to rise if we're not sleeping very well. That said, I have seen people improve on a nutritional ketogenic approach or doing some fasting approaches. Their sleep has improved because the system is running cleaner. And that tends to enhance sleep and also a better sense of rest when they wake. Stress, we can't talk enough about stress these days, but we've got to get a handle on stress, because if you're a super stressed out individual, approaching these kinds of techniques may not work for you, especially fasting for long periods of time. Now, I love this proverb from about 500 years ago: to rise at 6, to dine at 10, to sup at 6, and go to bed at 10 makes a man live 10 times 10. So the idea is here we have a 8-hour eating window, we get 8 hours of sleep, we got a 16-hour fast, and it tends to enhance longevity. Somebody noticed that a long time ago. All right, so I want to talk about results you can expect on these kind of programs. Now, it all depends on why you're coming here. So remember, we spoke about the why. So this first example, Sarah, her big why was she could not lose weight. She felt she had a very solid understanding of nutrition, consistent workout routine, and she hardly lost any weight at all over a 2-year period, working out almost 3 times a week pretty consistently. Now, when she took a program with me, which is an online 7-week program, she found that she got the education that she needed, right, to explain how food and when she eats affects her hormones. This altered her relationship with food significantly. It also increased her energy drastically. She lost 25 pounds in the 7-week window that we were working together on the online program. And a recent update, she said she has continued to lose weight. She has a renewed sense of energy, that she can actually work out better. Her workouts are far more productive. And she feels like she has way more hormonal stabilization. She doesn't go through the crazy PMS that she used to experience before. So the next individual here came with a very different set of goals in mind. She wanted to know more about nutritional ketosis, and she wanted to practice fasting techniques a little bit more consistently. And what she found is she had regulation in her hormonal cycle. She's a perimenopausal woman. She was having 16-day cycles. Those regulated really fast for her. The other thing is she had more consistent bowel function. This is one of those big myths out there that we should all be eating copious amounts of fiber because it's good for everyone. There are certain individuals who do not handle that much fiber very well. So what she found is she had more consistent bowel movements, going more of a low carbohydrate approach and paying attention to her nutrition. She also lost a little bit of weight, which was kind of a bonus. Now the third individual here, her biggest complaint was digestive distress. She had a lot of bloating. She felt like she was hungry quite often. She left the house early with multiple small meals prepped throughout the day. And she found that approaching the 7-week program, that within a couple of weeks, her bloat went down. She lost inches around the stomach. And overall, she felt like she was liberated from always having to think about food. She got a control over the cravings and more steady energy. And she lost 12 pounds over that period. So not everyone's going to come to it for the same reason. But everyone should get it right the first time and learn some valuable lessons so they know how to do these kinds of approaches for life. You want to set yourself up for metabolic flexibility. So a little bit about the course that I was mentioning. The ins and outs of nutritional ketosis are pretty well examined in here. How to get into it, how to get out of it, when you want to be in, when you want to be out. And then we also look at how nutritional ketosis and fasting are very natural ways to enhance your health, and we should be metabolically flexible. Lots of people get pretty obsessed about the macro ratios during a ketogenic diet, but it all depends on whether you're doing fasting, what kind of fasting you're doing, how strict you have to be with your macros. But what a lot of people lose sight of is all the other nutrients that they're missing from excluding large groups of food from their diet. So I like to really examine that and make sure that people are paying attention to overall health. We also examine what ketones are. We discuss the pitfalls of the diet, like, for example, decreased microbial diversity within the gut is something that some people will suffer with, and this is not necessarily a good marker for health. Obviously, metabolic flexibility is a big component of this. I believe that is necessary. And then we talk a lot about hormones, fat loss, muscle maintenance, and there's some bonus topics. I love to address autoimmunity. There's a lot of myths about how you should eat for certain kinds of autoimmune diseases. It all is very bio-individual once again, and you can treat a lot of autoimmune diseases through a low carbohydrate approach, believe it or not, and the scientific literature supports that. Leaky gut, female cycles, food sensitivities, we cover all of this kind of stuff. So other details about the program: if you join a program like this, you have lifetime access to all recorded material. Anytime anything's updated, you'll be notified. This program includes over 20 recorded sessions and some live presentations. I have Q&A calls that are live, and then I also answer and moderate a discussion board myself to make sure that people get clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, I keep talking about this why, so why don't you assess your readiness and decide if this is something you'd even like to do before we get into those. So, intermittent fasting and nutritional ketosis are powerful tools that you can add to your toolbox for health, absolutely. But you have to want to reduce your carbs and be able to stay there for several weeks at a time. If you cannot do that, maybe this approach isn't for you. But as I mentioned already, depending on what kind of fasting you're doing, that might loosen those restrictions for you. How would you rate your stress level? If you're a super stressed out individual that doesn't have time to add anything, you're feeling really overwhelmed, adding a program like this may not be what you need right now. You need to get a handle on that stress. Are you diabetic or pre-diabetic? This program can absolutely enhance insulin sensitivity. You will see definite changes in your blood sugars, so you need to be communicating with your primary care physician or anyone prescribing you medications, because those dosages are going to have to change, and you may even be able to get rid of some of those medications. Whether or not you engage in physical activity on a regular basis, we'll address this in the program, but it's important that you move. Any sort of adaptation that your body has to go through, adding movement is super important to that process. If you are hoping to conceive in the near future, maybe you don't want to keto adapt just yet, and fasting may not be the best approach for you now. So what is your primary reason for wanting to follow a program like this? Please just stop and think about your why. Now I'm going to help you out with some of those whys here in a moment. Some of the whys may be wanting to kick cravings and control hunger. I think this is a very important reason why. A lot of people don't seem to have control over their food. You want to heal leaky gut or digestive disorders? There's absolutely techniques in here that will help. You want to lose body fat while maintaining muscle mass? Who doesn't want to do that? We don't just want to weigh less, right? We want to burn fat. Decreasing inflammation, there's lots of studies to show that these approaches will help. If you've cut carbs before and you haven't really seen the benefits, you need to re-examine the way you did that. Maybe you didn't approach it correctly for where you are now. We get into that kind of discussion. If you want sustained energy, if you want increased mental focus, if you want power over food, this program is probably for you, for sure. It can definitely help. Are you looking to get a handle on autoimmune disease? We discuss this in depth in this program. If you want to reverse diabetes to get control of your blood sugars, this will absolutely help. You want to become metabolically flexible. Hopefully you realize that now. And you also need to understand that short-term sacrifice can lead to great reward. So focus on your why and what your outcomes are going to be. Now I want to just talk right now about the next steps. You can choose to work with me one-on-one. If you've watched this and you visit my website, drjeromecraig.com, you find a Book Now button. You can set up an initial consult. Type in MetFlex415 into the comment section and you'll get $100 off your initial consult. Now, this online program that I've kind of reviewed for you already, if you've watched this presentation, I have a discount for you as well. The next program will start here in the next couple of weeks. The code to get you $100 off plus an additional one-on-one session with me is MetFlex415+. There's a limited amount of those coupons. Once again, you can find that at drjeromecraig.com. Look under programs, select courses. You can read about it there. And don't forget to use that coupon on the checkout. Thank you so much for your time. If you found this to be helpful at all, please share it with someone else. And if you have any questions, type them in the comment section below and I'll try to answer them.